countdown. I'm like, we're
Right.
not going to do the countdown. We're going to do a glass case of emotion because it's NFL free agency talk in 3, 2, 1. Really? This is how teams are going to put things together in free agency. Not the most exciting, unless we talk defense, which we will a little bit, Bloom. But let's get into what's happening in the NFL in terms of NFL free agency. And we're going to start with the quarterback position and a flurry of activity. I think mainly we should talk about New Orleans and what they did in keeping Jameis Winston. We can throw in Cam Newton there if you want. But you have several things going on. You have the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing with Washington, probably the starter, competing with Taylor Heineke, probably beating Taylor Heineke. You have Andy Dalton to Chicago. Why? When you've Matt Ryan restructured, but you have Jacoby Brissett joining the Dolphins. We're not going to talk about Mike Glennon, but let's discuss what's going on at the QB position. And I think the big free agency question was, what are the Saints going to do with Drew Brees retired? And, well, just keeping Jameis Winston and then declaring an open QB competition, which I fully expect Winston to win.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when we're projecting this offense, we need to project 80% of the snaps to Winston, 20% to Taysom Hill, or something like that. Because Taysom Hill is not just competing with Jameis Winston. Taysom Hill is competing with the idea of Taysom Hill plays having more impact because they're a change of pace from the offense with Jameis Winston. So Taysom Hill has to be better than Winston plus Hill, which is going to be tough. And there's a lot of question, well, why wasn't Hill on the bench for Winston for those 4 games? The way it's been explained to me is the team knew with Atlanta up next when Brees went down, that with Hill's success against them in the past, that would probably be a game for him to get his feet under him. And then if he did well, leave him. And of course, the next game sees one that will live in Denver infamy, the non-quarterback game, then Atlanta again. And then he didn't look good against Philadelphia, and then Brees comes back. So I think that's how we project this offense. I think it keeps the Saints a contender. I think it keeps the Saints' offensive pieces very viable. And they've handled it well. The idea that this is coming up, Brees is going to be retiring, and you have to applaud Jameis Winston for making a choice that maybe wasn't maximizing money because there was talk that Chicago was in on him, but maximizing his chance of long-term success, of getting one more big bag, or maybe more if he can really turn it around. Sean Payton and that offensive staff, I understand why he would choose them over anyone else.
Right, and that's the direction they're going now. And the direction of Chicago with the Andy Dalton thing, Bloom, is weird because if you had a chance at Russell Wilson, if that's even a thing, if that's possible, and these trade conversations are in the background of free agency again, because free agency overall offensively, not terribly exciting. And some guys we thought would be first wave guys that aren't yet first wave guys, which is weird. But the Dalton thing, again, it just kind of trips me up because you had a chance or you're on the short list for a guy that you should be doing everything to get, not going out and getting Andy Dalton. It's the hold my beer moment. Hey, we have Mitchell Trubisky. We can't do any worse. Hold my beer.
So untangling this, we can all go back to whenever the Russell Wilson doesn't demand to be traded, but if he were to be traded, these are the 4 teams that he would be interested in being traded to, the Bears being one of them. Russell Wilson with the Bears, mortgage the franchise. And it sounds like from the offer that was leaked, 3 firsts, 2 thirds, 2 unnamed starters. That was a strong offer. However, they say that the Bears got an answer that the Seahawks are not trading Russell Wilson. Now, maybe that means they're not trading him to the Bears. Maybe that's just the way they let them down easy. Probably means they're not going to trade Russell Wilson, and they're going to figure out how to patch this up. And what does that leave us with Andy Dalton? Well, there's a connection to Bill Lazor from the Bengals days. And look, Andy Dalton is a fine quarterback in structure. This is going to be Mac Jones, right? This is the Mac Jones take. Mac Jones, Andy Dalton, who are we talking about? In structure, within the play, if the play works, Andy Dalton's going to execute. Outside of structure, you just hope he throws the ball away. That's a W on a play that doesn't work. He doesn't take a sack, he doesn't fumble, he doesn't throw an interception. You'll take that, live to fight another day. So, we saw even Mitchell Trubisky back in the day. Remember when Tampa's defense was actually one we picked on for fantasy?
Right.
Trubisky had a massive day against them. Matt Nagy can maybe get more out of Dalton than he did out of Trubisky. And it's not terrible for the Bears offense, but see, my reaction is you brought Pace and Nagy back for another year for this,
For that.
to see if they could make it work with Andy Dalton.
When they're clearly on the hot seat.
Right. So good luck. I mean, for the Bears fans out there, including our new staffer, Dave Kluge, who wrote it up for football guys. Check it out today. I mean, some condolences in some ways, but this is how it goes when your franchise doesn't really have a long-term vision. I think a lot of what I hear back from people in Bears land is don't assume they have a plan. They don't have a plan.
They don't have a plan. They're just winging it. And Bloom, you'd be surprised how many NFL teams are like that. Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? Our man Jason here talking about Fitzmagic, baby. Like, okay. Yeah. And Taylor Heineke is no slappy. I said when he was at the Shrine game years ago coming out of Old Dominion, if he was 6'4" instead of 6'1", he'd be a first-round pick. And, he flashed last year. So Fitzpatrick's the starter. And as much as I enjoy Taylor Heineke and just kind of seeing what he can do and understanding his skill set, I don't know if he could beat out Ryan Fitzpatrick, Bloom.
No, and that's okay. This is fun. This was the most, because going into free agency, the talk was he's contemplating retirement, right? Top 5 player to watch on Sundays. Is that fair, Cease? Top 5 most fun player to watch on Sundays, Ryan Fitzpatrick. How much fun do you think it is to play with him? How much fun do you think it is to be a member of his team? And this is a team that won a division, I know, 7-9, all that. But they won the division last year. We could bring up Curtis Samuel here. That's a good pickup for sure. We could bring up William Jackson. Let's just say Washington is making good moves. The way they're investing their money, what positions on their roster they're addressing. This is a well-run franchise. Ron Rivera and company have made this franchise go in a good direction. So for fantasy, you love Terry McLaurin now. Oh my, Terry McLaurin to the moon. Curtis Samuel reunited with Scott Turner. Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas. Look, this whole offense becomes more viable now. So just picture, if you can, Dak Prescott, Ryan Fitzpatrick shootouts. Oh, yes, please. So this is great. Of all the free agent news, he's taking out team allegiances and things like that. The one that just made me most happy inside. I think it happened overnight. A lot of people didn't see it when it happened in real time. They woke up to it. Oh, man, if we could wake up to something like that every day, we'd be happy.
That would be awesome. By the way, it's interesting that Ryan Fitzpatrick talked with the Broncos and then was considering retirement. Anyway, let's move on. And okay, a couple of just kind of cleanup notes here.
Sure.
Jacoby Brissett joining the Dolphins. Everyone's waiting if Tua's going to go to get traded to the Texans. The Texans adding Tyrod Taylor, and everyone's waiting if Deshaun Watson's going to get traded somewhere. Deshaun Watson's got some legal issues that will need to be cleaned up. And we'll see what happens there. It's a very interesting situation. And all of these things, Bloom, whether it's the Von Miller thing or this thing or whatever, it's like, oh, let's let the legal process run its course before we start jumping to conclusions, everybody. Because I love how everyone virtue signals like, I'm against sexual assault. Really? You should be. Don't be an ass. Like, of course. But let's wait and see what comes out of this. Is this something? Is this much ado about nothing? What is it? We don't know. In the meantime, no team's going to trade for Deshaun Watson. So in the meantime, Jacoby Brissett is the backup to Tua Tagovailoa, and Tyrod Taylor is the backup to Deshaun Watson, who doesn't want to play for Houston.
Yeah, I think that Brissett just reminds us that Miami is committed to Tua for this year. We'll talk next offseason, depending on how things go, about Miami's quarterback plan. Beyond that, Brissett gives them a nice high floor. Backup, maybe gets involved in some red zone goal line packages, things like that. The Tyrod Taylor one was definitely interesting because he signed a similar contract to Ryan Fitzpatrick or Andy Dalton, maybe lower base pay. He's the classic bridge quarterback, and it doesn't exactly indicate. It doesn't indicate that the Texans believe that Watson's going to be happy and in the building as being in training camp or in week 1, right? Because you don't need, who has even been the Texans' backup for the last few years to Deshaun Watson, right?
Right.
The point is they've never felt any kind of urgency, unlike say Andy Dalton and Dak Prescott last year. So it opens up the door because it also coincided with John McClain saying, "I believe the Texans are going to trade Deshaun Watson." Like on January 7th, McClain says, "I have a better chance of becoming the head coach than Deshaun Watson does of being traded." 2.5 months later, John McClain saying, "I believe he's going to be traded." It's something like they haven't not said he's not going to be traded or something. Double negatives. As you said, with the sexual assault civil suits, there's just no way to comment on it right now. All I can really say is no matter what we find out down the line, something really bad happened here. Something bad is going on. I'm not quite sure who the bad actors are yet, but this is not anything. This is not something that I think we've seen before. Either way,
I definitely haven't seen a lawyer talk about himself more than the charges or the allegations, I should say. Like, that's very, very rare. And again, having just dealt with the Von Miller situation, usually it's very lawyer speak, Bloom, something you're well versed in. This time it's like, I'm a Marine. I'm a, huh? Like, I don't give a damn. Tell me what's going on. As much as you can. But
certainly all these charges should be taken seriously until there's clearly a reason via the courts not to. And who would have guessed like 6 months ago that this would be the next chapter for Deshaun Watson, all of it. And I don't think it's over. I do still think that John McClain is one of the most trustworthy voices on any team in any market. So if he says, I believe the Texans are going to trade him, I think that that's going to be the outcome here. But obviously we have a lot of terrain to cover before we get there. So this, these are still the two stories, Wilson and Watson. I do think with the Bear story, we see the Wilson story maybe slant back towards he's going to be with the team. The Watson story just gets more bizarre and difficult, but maybe that's what it takes to free yourself from this franchise. I don't know.
And I think they're testing the waters with Wilson. I think it's for a trade next year, not trade this year. All right, let's get out and about on this running back situation. Are you surprised, like I was, that the Packers kept Aaron Jones? Because I was floored. Like, okay, this guy's going to hit the market. He's going to break the bank. He never even got to, because the Packers said, no. Even with A.J. Dillon, who everyone, in Dynasty was like, my A.J. Dillon stock going to skyrocket like Peloton or Bitcoin. Is it a good Bitcoin day or a bad Bitcoin day, Bloom? I never know. But let's talk about Aaron Jones first, because he was the attraction in free agency at the running back position, and he didn't even get to test the market.
No, he didn't. And I think that there's a credible idea here, Cease, that I think there was an idea of what unfinished business. It may have played in that his fumble was part of the story of how the Packers lost the NFC title game, and maybe he wanted to write that. He's going to get paid either way. Look, this is basically a 2-year deal. All right. It's a 2-year deal, and it's not, like you said, a top of the market kind of deal for him. He didn't just get the biggest bag that he could get. Maybe Cecil, we look at the Jameis Winston situation. Maybe more players are starting to understand that continuity is worth something. Being in a place that's going to breed more success in your career is worth something. And whether you make 18 million or 22 million or 30 or 35, it's not really going to change that much. You have the long-term security for your family. You have the generational wealth that you set out to attain whenever you became a professional football player. So yeah, it obviously hurts A.J. Dillon. You're now looking at A.J. Dillon not making significant contributions to this offense until year 4 of his rookie contract, because A.J. Dillon is not the answer to replace Jamal Williams' snaps in the passing game. That's Aaron Jones. So Aaron Jones' value goes up on this. I think this is the best place Aaron Jones could have landed, honestly, for his fantasy value back in Green Bay. But when they didn't franchise him or give him a transition tag, it felt like, okay, he's going to go to Miami. He's going to go to the Jets. He's going to go somewhere that he's going to get paid. So I think you're seeing Aaron Jones weighing things other than money in his decision. And I think that that's going to be good for him. It's going to be good for the Packers. It's going to be good for fantasy. Good for everybody except A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, good for everybody there. And good for Jamal Williams, who saw his friend Aaron Jones stay with Green Bay, and I thought both Williams and Jones would be gone from the Packers. Well, he went to the Detroit Lions, and now people with DeAndre Swift. I don't think this is quite the disaster for DeAndre Swift that some people are trying to paint it as, Bloom.
It's not a disaster, but it's not good. I mean, it's not a positive. And I would say, Cease, when we were projecting running back additions for the Lions, Jamal Williams is a better addition than we would have projected. So that's partially why it's not good. I mean, he's a competent back, or even a back that is a plus.
And he can play all three downs.
Right. He's a plus back in all aspects of the game. As someone was reminding me on Twitter, like I like to say, that's catnip for coaches. That's well, because it's just we want the running back who can make dazzling plays. We want the running back who can break a long one. But coaches like the running back that they just know he's going to do his job on every play. He's going to run the ball where it's supposed to be run on the play. He's going to pick up the blitz. He's going to make a competent play if he's asked to be the hot read or something like that.
Right.
Because that's where disaster happens. Teams have a lot more to lose when a running back blows his assignment than they have to gain when a running back makes three guys miss and runs someone over on the way to an 80-yard touchdown. I mean, that's just how the game is played. So is DeAndre Swift going to be better than Jamal Williams on passing downs? I don't think so.
No.
And that takes away some of Swift's value, some of Swift's upside here. It's not a huge contract, but I think it's a contract that indicates that Detroit had a priority. And that's what's interesting about the running back market in general, Cease, is the priority, and actually the wide receiver market kind of too, was for the mid or even low level players. Teams are just looking for depth. Teams are looking for veteran presences, backups, role players. And nobody's taking the bait on a Chris Carson right now, Leonard Fournette. Teams are waiting, which only can lead us to believe it's just not a priority. It's just not a priority for teams, which is especially surprising considering the teams out there, like we're mentioning, Miami, the Jets, Seattle, that don't really have an answer on their roster right now, at least a long-term answer at the position.
Yeah, the Dolphins, the next back situation I was going to talk about is them picking up Malcolm Brown. It's like, okay, they get some power. He's a natural player, instinctive, certainly. Love his contact balance. Not the rock star that Aaron Jones would have been. Especially with a quarterback that can scoot like Tagovailoa. So, okay, Malcolm Brown's there. What does that mean besides they're still going to draft a back?
Well, there you go, right? Because Brown got a $1.75 million salary fully guaranteed. Okay. He is, again, as you said, Cease, I mean, he's going to get the job done. He's not going to add value to his touches, but you like the idea of, and look, this is even Brown signing on itself probably takes away goal line work from Myles Gaskin. Otherwise, it's a good outcome compared to Miami's going to use some of their cap room to address the running back position and get a player better than Gaskin. But I think you're right. Look, they have 4 picks in the top 50, I think. Najee Harris at 18. That feels right to me, but we may, or Javonte Williams in the second round. The question here is,
if he'll make it that far,
right? The question here is, do Flores and Greer, have they really integrated running backs don't matter into their team building philosophy? It's possible because they're spending $4 million on the running back position right now. Teams are spending more on their kicker, one kicker than these 4 running backs are making for the Dolphins. But maybe this is a brilliant stroke by them to say, no, we actually do believe, because they're going to invest in a wide receiver. They're going to invest, maybe they'll get Kyle Pitts at number 3, or they'll trade down. I think they want one of the Alabama receivers. They just went out and signed Robert Foster, who for a moment was with Tua. So there's some clues there. So maybe their idea is you don't need to invest in running back. You need to invest on the line. You need to invest in a passing game. And then the running game kind of makes itself go. But I still think that the most likely outcome here is they add an impact player in the draft. And if they don't, we shouldn't assume that they didn't want to. It might just be that the draft didn't break that way for them.
As we look to other running back signings, Marlon Mack stays with the Colts, which is weird and disappointing, Bloom, honestly, with Mack's skill set. Now, he's supposed to be ready for camp, so we'll monitor that situation as he's coming back from injury. But he's the 3rd on the depth chart. And that's why it's disappointing, because Marlon Mack goes to Miami, Bloom, much more interesting. Marlon Mack goes to the Jets, much more interesting. Marlon Mack stays with the Colts. Wake me up when somebody gets hurt.
Probably. I will say, Cease, I took a lot of flack. I felt a week or two ago that the most likely outcome here was that Mack stays with the Colts. And there you have
and that
it.
was reported like a month ago or so. I can't remember which holder, I can't remember which Colts beat writer it was.
So I took some flack, Cease, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this. I think that this casts a shadow on Jonathan Taylor as a first-round pick in fantasy drafts. Maybe I should say like a top 10 pick or a top 8 pick. Because, and I get it, I mean, people will bring up Carlos Hyde, or they'll bring up other running backs that were signed elsewhere. But here's the thing. So I'll tell you who's not bummed out by this, Cease. The Colts.
You're right.
The Colts. The Colts are thrilled. Mack is thrilled. Now go look up the teammate reactions to this signing. There were more teammate reactions to this signing than any other one that I've seen, because they love him. Even in the last few months, he's been hanging around, rehabbing, and mentoring Hines and Taylor. He got $2 million fully guaranteed. Now, here's the pushback, and I get it. No running back has come back from an Achilles tear to be a significant contributor. Okay, it just hasn't happened. And I have to account for the possibility. And what's going to be interesting here is watching training camp. When is he full speed? But if he is full speed, or 90% speed, full speed for whatever he's going to be for the rest of his career, because the idea is Achilles tears take something away from running backs that they can't get back, that might not be the same as other positions where players have come back from Achilles tears, like cue Dr. Gene, bring Dr. Gene in right now, right? They love Marlon Mack, okay? At the beginning of the year last year, Marlon Mack was playing ahead of Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor broke out at the end of the year. Marlon Mack busted his Achilles, so things have changed since then. But you mentioned Stephen Holder. I think Zach Kiefer also said the team has no problem sharing carries between these players. Holder said, I was bummed we didn't get to see Taylor-Mack duo. Now maybe we'll get to see it. Zach Kiefer said these three are unselfish players, the third being Hines, of course. And the team and the players will have no problem dividing up this work. Now, again, the variable here is whether Mack really gets back to a level physically this year, because the narrative is this was just the team doing him a solid. This is the team paying him during his rehab year for him to be a mentor, a coach, just locker room presence. And that's okay. That's the kind of business we want to see teams do. But I think if Mack comes back to, again, 90% of his previous form, he's going to play into this backfield more than 3 touches a game or 5 touches a game. And then you have Hines, who's one of the better passing game weapons out of the backfield in the league. Where does that leave Jonathan Taylor? Now, Jonathan Taylor could still score 20 touchdowns. Carson Wentz could make this offense go bananas. And Jonathan Taylor, even with 60% of the work in the backfield, could justify a top 5 running back pick.
Right.
But this was not, I think this is not the news you wanted if you got Jonathan Taylor.
I think people were projecting on Jonathan Taylor of some great role that he would have. Is he a fine back? Certainly. But Nyheim Hines is there. Hines was the guy that would keep me from taking Jonathan Taylor in that first round of my fantasy draft, especially if you're playing a PPR league. So it was already there, Bloom. And the pushback is just, don't get me started on my social
It's what makes the fantasy football world go round. It's okay. We can talk about it on a Peloton ride.
That's for sure. We can do that. As we're old men pedaling on a bike that goes nowhere. It is Sigmund Bloom and Cecil Lammey talking about the running back position, and Phillip Lindsay walked away from the Broncos. Now, he hasn't signed anywhere. I've talked to quite a few people about him, Bloom. One person told me the Chiefs would welcome him with open arms. I was then told by someone very close to the situation, I'll tell you off air who it is, that said, well, Eric Bieniemy does know his family really well. Obviously, the CU connection. If you want CU connections, look at the Jets roster. My God. Tyler Embry, John Embry's son, is on the roster. John Embry was a coach at CU. Phillip Lindsay was there. So, like, okay, look at the Jets roster. It's full of former Broncos coaches and CU connections. Jets have a need. People talk about the Patriots, whatever is whatever, but they have just decided today to rescind the original round tender. So he is unrestricted. He will go somewhere. He will land somewhere, perhaps within the next 24 to 48 hours. And Bloom, I mean, we can talk about Lamar Miller or Josh Adams or whoever else. Mike Boone, though, signing with Denver yesterday, I was like, oh. And then I put it out. Speaking of pushback, Bloom, and this is why I roll my eyes about that, because I put out there something about Mike Boone, who we all know and appreciate his game. And then people are like, take it easy. No, they're not going to the playoffs. If they got Deshaun Watson, they're probably not going to the playoffs. So, let's all calm down. Let's just know Mike Boone's a good back that's going to play special teams and probably start when Melvin Gordon gets hurt or suspended. So there you have it. When Boone signed Bloom, it was over for Lindsay. Yeah. I talked to him. Anyone that wants to hear a player's emotion, listen to my interview with Phillip Lindsay from like 2 weeks ago, denverfan.com, because it's basically a verbal resume and maybe a little bit of a chewing on Pat Shurmur. And it's definitely an indictment on Pat Shurmur, for sure.
There's a lot here, Cease. This has been an interesting case study, and we all owe you a debt, as we always do with anything Denver related and many other things. Keeping us on top of this. Because you've been beating the drum that there's nothing Phillip Lindsay can do to endear himself to this team. There's nothing he can do. Back-to-back 1,000-yard years as an undrafted free agent in a team that offensively has been, their own worst enemy at times. Doesn't matter. They did him a favor by rescinding the tender because now he can choose his team. And Phillip Lindsay's whole MO is proving people wrong. Well, now he's got the biggest one of his life, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is going to be fuel for his tank for the rest of his career. And so it's perfect in a way. Like, go get Phillip Lindsay in your dynasty leagues right now. If you're doing an early best ball draft, take Phillip Lindsay in the 15th round or whatever. Because I think you're going to see, as we've already seen, I mean, he's always been on this mission to prove everybody wrong. And he's basically done it. He got hurt last year, okay? He would have outperformed Melvin Gordon if he hadn't gotten hurt. So you mentioned some good teams there. Kansas City, that was a team I think that a lot of people, and remember, Kansas City let Damian Williams go, signed Darrell Williams, but Phillip Lindsay can outperform Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think. Oh, man. Seattle, the Jets. And what would make me happier than hearing that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be starting in the NFL in 2021? If the Pittsburgh Steelers went out and got Phillip Lindsay.
Wow.
I would audibly, probably to my neighbors, yell, right? I mean, if the news came across the wire that the Steelers signed Phillip Lindsay, I would really do a little dance for that because it's just too perfect, right? Phillip Lindsay in black and gold, Cease. Phillip Lindsay in black and gold.
Well, and Canada would know what to do with them for sure.
Either way, I'm rooting for Phillip Lindsay to make the Broncos look bad. I'm sorry, Cease. I shouldn't say sorry to you because you don't have an invested interest in the Broncos looking good. But I'm rooting for him to make the Broncos look bad. And wherever he lands, that team should be really excited about adding a player like Phillip Lindsay because he really represents, again, that idea of, give me something to overcome. I climb Mount Everest? Well, then give me a taller mountain than that.
Right.
Give me a rocket ship or a jetpack and I'll go to the moon. You want me to go past the moon? I'll go to Mars. He's done it at every point in his career. I think he's going to do it again.
Mm-hmm. It's like It's a Wonderful Life, Bloom. What do you want? What do you want? The moon? I'll lasso the moon for you. Yeah. There's my horrible Jimmy Stewart impression. Any cleanup on running backs here you want to talk about? Damian Williams not going to the Chiefs, which opens the Phillip Lindsay door. Right. But Darrell Williams staying. I mentioned Lamar Miller. So there are a couple
Carlos
of
Hyde. Carlos Hyde reunited with Urban Meyer.
Sorry, should have got that.
Let's always keep this stuff in mind. Curtis Samuel not reunited with Urban Meyer, instead reunited with Scott Turner. But always look for those connections, just like you're talking about with Kansas City and Phillip Lindsay. Always look for those connections. Carlos Hyde. But I think if you got James Robinson, Carlos Hyde signing with the Jags is good news because it's the kind of signing that will keep them from drafting a running back in the second or third round. It's the kind of signing that will keep them from signing someone that could actually be a true tandem mate with James Robinson. So I think it's good news overall, even though we associate Carlos Hyde with killing fantasy value.
Well, let's transition there because you mentioned Curtis Samuel, who's a running back or a wide receiver, whatever. Now with Washington, and is Kenny Golladay signed anywhere yet? I know the Bengals offered him, and then the Giants are taking a look at his hip. But that was one of the first moves. Like, oh, Kenny Golladay, that it'll be Monday at 12:01, and Kenny Golladay will sign somewhere. And here we are on Thursday, and nothing's happened yet. So let's start with Curtis Samuel, and then give me a Kenny Golladay update.
With Samuel, you just like the continuity here. Remember when Scott Turner started calling plays when his dad led him at the end, you can drive the car slow in the driveway. He was called a lot of Curtis Samuel runs, and Curtis Samuel really blossomed as a receiver last year. So you look at the McLaurin, Samuel, Thomas combination with Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick. This is fun. This is a fun offense. With Ryan Fitzpatrick, a lot of fun. And fun usually means good for fantasy. The wide receiver market, Cease, might be the biggest story of free agency. In so much that at every point on the calendar, Cease, whether we're talking about coaching hires or how teams handle franchise tag decisions or how teams handle free agency or how teams draft, or even what we start hearing coming out of OTAs and training camps and things like that. What's really excellent about being so obsessed with football and fantasy football the way we are is that we watch this real-time story unfold of how the game is changing. And unlike the other three major sports, it is always changing. It is always in motion. And wide receiver used to be a position until very recently that would set the market. It was, look at the franchise tags. So you want a story, just look at the amount of the franchise tag number for each position. And that tells you how teams have been valuing positions, right? Running back and tight end and off-ball line. Well, linebacker gets lumped in with edge. That's a whole other thing. Shaq Barrett, good for you, man. Getting your extra mil plus on that agreements. Yep. Hey, man. It's nice to get extra mil, like finding it in your pants.
Couch cushions.
Right. Anyway, so I think what we're seeing here is going back 15 years, speaking about pushback, so you can remember when we started banging the drum that running back by committee is going to be a thing. And you're going to hate it for fantasy football, but it makes sense for the NFL.
Right.
And we've actually seen the full evolution of that until running back doesn't matter. At wide receiver, I think we're seeing something similar happen. I'm going to make a nod to my man, Eric Stoner, because we're always talking about this stuff, texting back and forth. And Eric Stoner was well ahead of this. I think what we're seeing, Cease, is it's a more specialized position now. Teams are getting much better at saying, okay, well, maybe out of these 10 things that a wide receiver does, you do 3 of them really well. Well, we're going to have a role in the offense where you do those 3 things. And we're not going to ask you to do the other 7 things. And your classic number 1 receiver who maybe can do 8 or 9 of those things, not really important in an offense. You don't need that. Look at what the Rams did. You don't need that.
Right.
Put guys in positions to succeed, and you draft guys in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, or you sign mid-level free agents, and you mesh together these skill sets with a good offensive game plan, a good scheme where you're asking people to do things that they do well. You don't need to set the market with a Kenny Golladay. You don't need to set the market with a Juju Smith-Schuster. And that's why these guys are waiting. This is the first class of free agent wide receivers to see that the NFL is wising up about where you need to spend and how much you need to spend to make a good football team, a winning football team. So, with Golladay, Cease, we can talk about his injuries. We can talk about he's 28. He came in as an older rookie. So that's another thing. Anytime you're looking at these free agent signings, folks, teams are not paying for what players did. They're paying for what they think players are going to do. So let's just say, actually, the Jets.
They're not looking for reasons to pay you. They're looking for reasons not to pay you.
Right. So, look at the Jets. Hey, say what you will about the Jets signings, but they're all like 25, 26-year-old guys whose best football is probably ahead of them. Think about that career arc. You want to be signing guys at the top or coming up to the top of their career arc. You don't want to be signing guys who are at the end of their top or even past their top. And I think with Kenny Golladay, there's some concerns there. I think Galladay's going to getting like Alshon Jeffrey. Actually, Golladay and Jeffrey aren't that different, right? Alshon Jeffrey, remember, signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles after the Bears didn't keep him. And then the Eagles, well, the rest, they spent a lot of money that they probably wish they didn't spend on Jeffrey. So I think you're looking at that picture for him. For Juju, I guess teams are, he's 24, so he's still on that upslope of his career, kind of like Randall Cobb when Cobb re-signed with the Packers for, a little bit of a sweetheart deal for them. I just think we're seeing an evolution in how teams look at the wide receiver position, and that's why the signings that we will talk about, Curtis Samuel is one of the biggest ones, or Nelson Aguilar, or we can talk about all of these different role players changing teams, but the marquee free agent wide receiver might be a thing of the past.
It's a little off track, Bloom, but I don't care. It's our show.
Yeah.
This also trickles into the draft, because what do we hear as a constant ding on players? You can't run the full route tree.
Right.
Doesn't matter anymore. DK Metcalf.
Who cares?
Think he could run the full route tree? I mean, he's better now, but not much. You think DK Metcalf can run the full route tree? I mean, but what can you do? I'll just do that a bunch. Who cares about that? So, yeah, anytime we're talking draft and someone's like, you can't run the full route tree. All right, Boomer. Okay, Boomer.
Quarterback doesn't take snaps under center.
Does that make me a Boomer? Does that make me a Boomer? Not getting that right? All right,
we're
Bloomer.
Not boomers.
Bloomer, you're a Bloomer.
Yeah.
Boomer actually doesn't
have
have anything to do with age, by the way. I love when people try to bring that up, and it's like, if you know the origins of OK Boomer, it doesn't have anything to do with age. So, all right, let's get to that next level of wide receivers. Egon Dewey. You can't spell Buffalo without E. Wait a second.
At the end?
It's something. Because you're excited that Emmanuel Sanders is signing with the Buffalo Bills and replacing John Brown. Smoke. Oh, love Smoke. And now he's in Vegas. So let's talk about how those guys kind of flip-flop there.
Well, the Raiders, let's start with John Brown. A cheaper signing, I think $3.75 million. But you need that speed to replace Nelson Aguilar. So that's going to also give Henry Ruggs and Brian Edwards a good mentor. It slows down.
Aguilar stay with everything that he did there and signing with the Patriots, whatever.
Well, look, the Raiders. So it's funny, Cecil. I mean, the two most interesting teams to look at with free agency in the AFC are the Patriots, which is, we could spend a whole show talking about what the Patriots have done in free agency, what it represents. And the Raiders, did you see it was a TikTok, I think, Cecil. See, there you go. I'm not a boomer. I'm talking about TikTok, but I think it was a TikTok that I saw on Twitter. So, I don't know if that counts. So it was like how different people handle free agency. It was like Kevin Colbert. And then what it is a cat coming down the stairs and a bunch of plastic cups, right? And Kevin Colbert is the cat that steps in between all the cups and doesn't knock anything over, right? Bill Belichick was another one that was similar, although, again, that's changed a little bit. That's for another show. That's like a Thursday night show thing. John Gruden was the cat it stops at the last step and looks for an opening and tries to jump into the cups and then knocks a bunch of cups over, which freaks the cat out when he runs through the rest of the cups, and it's just a giant mess, right? It's just a total mess, like a freak out, I don't know what to do. And that's the Raiders in free agency. So you're right. Maybe keeping Aguilar over Brown instead of signing Brown, it wouldn't have been as cheap, but it's continuity. And just Brian Edwards may not take off quite as quickly. Likewise with Gabriel Davis. And what you see with Buffalo, I think, is maybe it was Brown's durability that was part of the reason, because they didn't pay Sanders that much less than Brown. Brown was going to get, I think, maybe 8, and Sanders got 6 or something like that. Sanders is an excellent addition for them because he still got it. I mean, watch him last year with the Saints. He still has it. And now you give Josh Allen, because they like to put those 4 wide receiver sets out there. So you have Josh Allen now with another viable target. And hey, injuries happen. So this team is pushing, make strengths stronger. Really like seeing that. I think the next one we may see is T.Y. Hilton. And since he hasn't gotten signed yet, maybe he ends up back with the Colts.
Right. Marvin Jones Jr., though, we saw him sign with Jacksonville. So Jacksonville trying to string together some exciting moves for Trevor Lawrence.
And you see the Marvin Jones-Darrell Bevel connection from Detroit, slowing down Colin Jones. So, we're always thinking of which young player was in position to get more opportunity if a team didn't address the position. In this case, it was Colin Johnson. Did I say Colin Jones? I don't know. He's a basketball player or something. Anyway, safety. I don't know, my brain is frazzled, speaking of being old. But Marvin Jones is also still a very good player. Marvin Jones produced very well down the stretch last year. And it just reminds us how excited we are for this Jacksonville offense. How much better is this offense going to be with Trevor Lawrence? So you've got Chark, Jones, and Laviska Shenault. There's your Colorado connection. That's fun. James Robinson in the backfield. That's fun. So I like going out and getting Marvin Jones. It's one of the moves the Jags made. I think it was one of their best moves. Some of them are a little more questionable, but this one makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense for that team and what they want to do. What, John Ross? Who am I missing here, Bloom? Just going through some of the signings at the wide receiver position. Zay Jones. No. John Ross gets his fresh start with the G-Men, and I guess Rashard Higgins stays with Cleveland.
Right, that's
which
one.
Makes it 2 years in a row. Okay, Alshon Jeffrey gets released. Here's some free agent news for you. So we've got some cleanup. I think we got rid of the hits, right, at wide receiver. Just double checking here. So yeah, let's do a little cleanup on wide receivers.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I mean, again, that's the fact that the postscript isn't really that interesting. Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar to the Patriots. Aguilar, I think, is more of a tactical piece than one that's going to be productive because of the 2 tight end offense, which we'll get to in a second. Kendrick Bourne, just a really good all around receiver. It was good to see him get paid because he was outproducing what he was getting paid with San Francisco for a while. AJ Green to Arizona. You want to talk about that?
Yes.
$6 million.
Yeah.
So they're probably ushering out Larry Fitzgerald. I don't like AJ Green as an outside receiver. I think they may be looking at him as one. Now, AJ Green is a big slot right now, kind of the role that Larry Fitzgerald was playing. Okay, I'm still not that interested for fantasy football, but I'm glad that AJ Green at least got some respect. Tyrell Williams is going to start for Detroit. Okay, I mean, at least what I like there is Brad Holmes saying, we're not going to compete this year, so let's just get and Tyrell Williams, of course, experience with Anthony Lynn, so you have some continuity there. Again, always look for those connections, both forecasting and understanding free agent pickups. But the main story here is, and I guess, hey, Allen Robinson's going to be worth his franchise tag. The teams that Chris Godwin's going to be worth his franchise tag. I think Chris Godwin's still going to get a long-term deal before it's all said and done. Sorry if you have Tyler Johnson. So those guys are not going to make their teams look bad for giving them franchise tags. I do think one thing we can say now is the Lions were right to not franchise Golladay. I think it would have been the wrong move. So another W for Brad Holmes.
Next, we get to the Patriots section. I mean, the tight end section. Can you believe they got both? Like, this doesn't do much from a man, Dalton Keene, who is an H-back, fullback, running back, tight end, gadget quarterback. But Devin Asiasi, your dynasty stock just took a nosedive because they got both Jonnu Smith. When that happened, Bloom, I was like, wow, what a great move, New England. And then they go get Hunter Henry. I'm like, what are you doing, Belichick? You're hoarding all the tight ends. They got 2 of the best ones. There's other news. Gerald Everett's very interesting. But let's talk about this Patriots duo now and what New England's trying to do.
I do have to go back one more wide receiver. Andrew Frost in the chat room brought up Corey Davis. And Corey Davis, is good to see him get paid. Again, that's one of those signings where the Jets are paying for some good years coming up in a player's career. I do think Zach Wilson's going to end up being the quarterback there, which is probably good for Corey Davis, although his role isn't going to be as plumb as it was with A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry distracting defenses. So moving on to this tight end. So it was interesting, Cease. Johnny Smith was the first, you talked about at 10 a.m. on Monday morning announcement. That was Johnny Smith. Johnny Smith. Like, no team wanted to sign a player as badly as the Patriots wanted Johnny Smith. And here's another skeleton key for you. Bill Belichick has gushed about Johnny Smith in the past. Bill Belichick, his psychology is pretty simple and straightforward. If a player's tough to prepare for, tough to play against, if that player's available, I want to get that player. And he did, you know. And Johnny Smith, I don't think he's had more than like 64 targets in a season. He may have 100 targets this year. And even with Hunter Henry, at first when Henry was signed, so Henry signed the next day, right? Johnny Smith is signed, and it looks like, wow, he might be one of those tight ends that is the centerpiece of the pass offense. And at times you watch him play, and maybe he deserves that. And then they go get Hunter Henry the next day. And what was fascinating there is the betting markets, even after Johnny Smith was signed, the Patriots were still the favorite to sign Hunter Henry. What? The betting markets, don't doubt Vegas. Don't doubt those betting markets because they end up getting Hunter Henry. And of course, it's hearkening back to the Gronk, Aaron Hernandez days. Okay, Smith's not Gronk. Hunter Henry's not Aaron Hernandez, or however you want to match them up. But it's not bad as a strategy, as your base offense, to be 12 personnel. Mm-hmm. Both Smith and Henry are good run blockers. Smith is a good downfield receiver. Henry is a functional receiver, a competent receiver in the short and intermediate range. And you keep defenses off balance.
Well, and what surprises me, Bloom, is our conversation about running backs earlier. As the defense gets smaller and more agile, and inside linebackers are now 225.
Right.
Why don't you just pound people into submission?
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's Belichick. Everyone's zigging, right? Oh, we're going to follow this trend. Trendy. And then Belichick's like, old school football.
Yeah.
Let's run it down their throat. 2 tight ends.
Yeah. And 2 tight ends who are good receivers. So I like it from a team building strategy. I think also, remember, they brought back Cam Newton right before free agency, which I think much like players want to play with Ryan Fitzpatrick, players want to play with Cam Newton. So that couldn't have hurt getting all of these guys in. And there's a whole other Brady Belichick storyline that is fun that we'll continue to probe. But I applaud it. I think that, especially considering look, you get top end of the market tight ends for like $12 million a year, not $15, $16, $17, $18 million a year. And if you know how to use them, and Belichick and McDaniels obviously do, then you can make an offense that keeps defenses off balance. So it's going to be an extremely different Patriots offense than the one we saw the last time they were on the field.
Gerald Everett gets to catch passes from Russell Wilson for a year. So there's that.
Yeah.
Actually like that. They've been looking for tight end. And hell, it would have been Will Dissly. He showed a lot of skill. He just hurt all the time. So they've been trying for a while to get a tight end like Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett's been trying to get away from the Rams so he could have it all to himself. It was like Everett, Higbee, Everett.
Right. And that's, Higbee now gets freed in a way. Everett, interesting signing for a team that wants to recommit to the run. That's not really where he contributes, but he is an excellent receiving tight end. A 1-year deal. See, what you like about the 1-year deals is you can harvest some of the player's value, and then if you use him well and he does well, then you get a comp pick, or you keep the player and you got a new long-term piece of your franchise. So I think it's a very smart move. And 1 year, $6 million. $6 million for a tight end. Here, Tyler Kroft got $6 million a year. Jesse James got $6 million a year. Gerald Everett can do a lot more for your football team than Jesse James or Tyler Kroft. So again, we watched the ebb and flow. But tight ends were a franchise that teams were overpaying for, a position teams were overpaying for in recent years. Gerald Everett sat out there, stayed within the division. I think it's a good spot for him with Russell Wilson, assuming Russell Wilson's still there. Like you said, Dissly's still there. They still have the receivers. But I'm looking forward to watching him play in Seattle.
Clean up on tight end, Bloom?
Jeez, I don't even know. I mean,
Lee Smith was traded. You want to talk about Zach Ertz actually being allowed to seek a trade?
Well, that's the whole thing, right? So Zach Ertz, what are we going to say? Let's speculate a little bit. There's still Buffalo. There's still Indy.
There's still Kyle Rudolph sitting out there, by the way.
Yeah, Kyle Rudolph is still out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Buffalo, Indy, and the Chargers. So here's your fantasy football take, right? Dawson Knox, Mo Alley Cox. This is going to rhyme like Dr. Seuss, right? Dawson Knox, Mo Alley Cox, and Donald Parham. Now, Parham's just under contract. We saw him, got wheels. He's massive. Similarly with Mo Alley Cox, who got a second-round tender. Second-round tender means we don't want anybody to take this guy from us. So Carson Wentz loves to throw the tight end. If Zach Ertz doesn't go to Indy, Mo Alley Cox. If Ertz, and I think Buffalo wants a tight end. There was some talk they were trying to get in on Gronk. Gronk back to Tampa, by the way. That's $10 million. Still, I think O.J. Howard's going to be back. We're not that interested in Gronk for fantasy. But you have Ertz is going to land somewhere, and it may be a team that isn't one of those 3 teams. But wherever Ertz doesn't land, that increases the opportunity for these guys. The wheel continues to turn at tight end. And Ertz is going to be, I think, an attractive pickup because I think you only pay him like $5 million this year or something like that. You know exactly what he's going to contribute to the offense. So that's definitely the big shoe that we're waiting to drop at tight end.
That's right. And we're waiting for more free agency moves to get done. And we've got some stuff coming up on this YouTube channel that you will not want to miss. So make sure to do all those YouTube things, like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. When more free agency news happens, we will be there to talk about it. He's Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey. The show is at The Audible. We say thank you. Namaste. Go forth. Be awesome. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty, baby.